Hey, so this is new for me. I've put up a bunch of shorts, and some people have asked if I would do longer videos, so I'm going to do some longer videos. I've been an artist for as long as I can remember. I'm also a graphic designer and an illustrator. You can see my website. It's karadraws.com. But first, what I like to do when I watercolor is get my paints wet. This is a really old set. I got it at Barnes & Noble about 15 years ago in their bargain section. I like watercolor because it's cheap. And if you're an artist or just a normal human being like me, you may not have oodles of cash lying around. So I like watercolor because it lasts a long time. My water jar is an old chicken bouillon cube jar. Most of my brushes have been given to me by my neighbor, who is a great friend, and also because she's 82, she's getting rid of a lot of stuff, which I don't care for, but I really appreciate her, helping with my art and sharing her supplies with me. So some of my good brushes are from her. Thanks, Deanna. So first of all, I got my paper wet, and I'm just adding little blobs of color. I kind of feel like I know where greens are going to go, maybe, because I like to paint flowers. If you follow me, you know what I like to paint. So I'm going to drop in colors here and there, and I look at flowers in my life. I wander around outside. It's my favorite activity. And I have an incredibly old Macintosh computer here in my basement that barely works, but it is great if I need references for flowers. Most of the time I just look at a flower and then just make it up. So I've got some colors here, and what I'm going to do next is I'm going to make some blue that's dark. And I'm going to do that by mixing some of my blues. But I also like to get some, I like to keep my colors really pure, but I also like to mix a little bit in, like I might mix in a little bit of purple, just because that makes things, kind of unique. And I'm just going to do some flower centers, and I'm just going to put them where they kind of feel right. I think about a bouquet of flowers or a handful of flowers. I don't like to pick flowers because I'd rather they be living outside. But if you think of a bunch of flowers in your hand, where they might be placed, I don't feel like there's any right or wrong. Then I rinse off my brush just a little bit. And I'm going to pull some of the color out, and it didn't pull the way I wanted. So instead of that, I'm going to make some potential petal shapes by just moving my brush, wiggling it around a little bit. And that way I'm starting to get a basis for where my flowers might end up, how some of the petals might look. And I can just keep adding on to it. So I make petal shapes by just wiggling my brush around like you're seeing. My brushes are not fancy. My supplies are not fancy. So there you have it. I like this brush. I don't know what brand it is. It's clear, and I like it because I can use the back end to kind of trace some shapes. You cannot really see it yet, but in the end you will. So I kind of just wiggle some shapes of flower petals. I think it adds interest later to have little lines and little details, little scratch marks. I have a feeling there will be some stems, so I'm going to pull the end of this. I like this plastic brush for this because if I use this, the blue rubs off. So I don't like that because I'd rather it be clean. Okay, I might do a swirl in the center of a couple of them because I think that's fun. Now I'm adding some more color. I'm adding more purple. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to add some more little dots perhaps to the center of this flower here. And I'm going to think that this center might be over here. I'm going to say that this flower might be a side flower, so I'm going to anticipate it going this way, and I might pull it a little bit. See, I get a little bit of color from this off, which you can see what I'm talking about, but it's okay, just little bits, just little areas. So I kind of like some of the flowers aiming different directions, so they're not all, you know, face forward, so to speak. So I put that down. I put it down, this brush down, but I put it down carefully because that way I can still use the color. And I'm going to try to, you know, add to my petals a little bit. I don't know what kind of flowers these are. Some kind of poppy, something with big, wide blooms. I pick up water and then I pull it around and then add a little more. So I get, you know, some petal shapes in there. Think about where your light's coming from. As I do this, I'm thinking about that. I usually have it coming from, you know, somewhere up above. And I'm just making this up as I go. If there are things that I like as I go, like for example, I really like this light blue right there. So I'll probably try to preserve that. And so some of these areas are pretty wet, so I can pull some of the color off. And you see that starts to make different shapes. Starts to differentiate, you know, from one flower from the other. So, you know, we put color down, but you also pull it back off. So you're putting down, pulling off as you go. And I kind of like to work around all these flowers at the same time because they're sort of a flower, they're, you know, the same kinds of flowers. They're a flower family, you know, in this particular picture. I have another set of watercolors that I'm not using right now. It's upstairs because a friend was borrowing it. So I'm missing a few of my colors, but that's okay. So flowers have they have centers with little, you know, pieces that stick off, little dots, little petals, all kinds of little things that are going on. And just spending time with flowers or outside, you know, you get a lot more than you might realize, and just on how exactly your flowers might go, how they might work in nature, and translate onto your page. So just keep going. And you can see how some of the areas that I have scratched, that I scratched before, show up. I think that adds a lot of interest for me. I enjoy seeing that. I have spent a lot of time throughout my life painting what I think other people want to see. trying to decide who's going to pay for what subject matter. And I have not found a lot of subject in guessing what other people are interested in. So now I paint what I want to paint, and I feel like at least I'm happy while I'm painting. For me, painting feels about as essential as air. Not just painting, but art in general. I feel like if I'm not creating, my body starts to feel unhappy. Start to feel not like I'm not very balanced. Going to go and I'm going to add a little bit of darker petal color. I am sticking with green. I really like this more olive color green, but I also really like my paintings feeling like they are communicating with each other, and the way I do that is I add, for example, to this green I added a little purple that I don't know if you could see that, but I mean I might add a little blue to it too, because then I feel like there's a color, there are colors in here that are going to be speaking to each other, so to speak. It's going to feel like they're connected. And you know, at this point I'm kind of guessing, you know, where I think you know, a leaf might be, or a stem, and that's how I'm deciding where to put these. I like to use just the very tip of the brush, and it's pretty loose in my hand. That way I get these thicks and thins that you see. And to make a good leaf, I touch the tip and then I push it down and pull it like that. Touch and pull. It makes a nice leaf, and you know, there you go. Then you can come back later and you can add more. You know, you can add centers, you can add lines, you can add other details, or you can just leave them like that. There's not the thing about art that I think is important to remember is there's not a right or a wrong. To me, a lot of people, you know, in art school say, you know, this is right and this is wrong. I don't work like that. So I sort of feel like if you're, you know, if you're exploring, if you keep going, you know, research is great. Looking what other people are doing is great. Books are great. Art school I really enjoyed. But I feel like the whole package just kind of keeps speaking to you, and you know, I don't think there's any problem with learning how different types of materials work. I'm all about learning and education, and practice makes perfect and all those good things. But I do feel like practice is the biggest teacher. And you don't want to give up either. It's like, you know, some days, right now I'm mixing a darker color so I can maybe make some centers on my flowers. And I don't like using black. That is one thing from when I was in college or years ago. If you mix, that I agree with, if you mix an ultramarine blue and a dark brown, this is kind of a gray, you'll get much more interesting blacks and dark colors. So I'm going to make these kind of a poppy of some sort, like I said, okay? So they've got, I'm going to make them have little dark, I'm going to have dark centers, those little, Should learn words for flower centers. The little centers with all the little bits sticking out. If you find a section you feel like is too wet, rinse off your brush, dry it off, and you can pull stuff up. Okay, so I feel like this whole section is really wet, so I'm going to do this. I pull some of it off, okay? And while I work on another section that can dry. This is my favorite brush. The tip comes off. I need to super glue it, but I love this little teeny brush because I can come back with and I can make more little dots, and it's so small that I can add little details like this and it doesn't get everywhere. I'm not looking at flower centers while I'm doing this. I have done that lots of times. So this is just for fun, just for kicks, and I hope that you enjoy it, regardless of whether or not it's correct. I feel like there's a lot of supposed to's in life, and I'm not very good at those. At this point in my life, I just paint because I enjoy it. And it relaxes my brain. And for that, I am very grateful. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes my brain wants to think about too many things at once, and this helps me relax. I've got so much going on in these little flowers at this point, and I think it's fun to go through with, I'm using not the darkest color that I made, but this other purple blue color, and I can at this point kind of define a little bit of the flowers. I really like loose floral. I like loose paintings in general, expressionist paintings, the impressionists. I like when there's a lot of feeling, a lot that's implied rather than defined. I think there's a lot of beauty in that, and so that's kind of what I do. I want the flowers to be able to kind of find their own way out of the paint and onto the paper. And working, with general shapes and colors to more specific shapes and colors, I kind of feel like they get to have a voice. And I think nature has a lot of wonderful things to say, and so I like leaving a lot of the details for the to the painting itself to kind of discover as I go. I love to put paintings aside after I've done them and then look at them a few hours later, and I feel like they're always surprises that maybe I didn't intend, maybe the way the light hits a certain area, and I think that's so much fun. I really, really like that. And there's some kind of a flower back in here, I started doing from the side. So I'm giving it a little bit, of a shape back here. And there's some nice darks on my palette here from all the different watercolors that I've done. And I like to dip into those like I just did because you get some really neat colors. I like the colors to be pretty pure that I use. I don't like it to get too muddy, but at the same time, you get some wonderful nuanced colors. By mixing things that you know, the edges of my palette, and you get such wonderfully fun, unique colors. And if I go back to my green, well, I still had this stuff on it, then that's a new green and it's darker. So if I want to come back in here, you know, where I've got some of these leaves happening, and I can add cool leaf shapes so they can kind of have a voice back there, not be quite as lost. I really do like a lost and found look. I like colors coming and going. I like things bleeding into the background and then coming back out. And I think that there's a lot of fun in that. So I'm just going back through now on some of the stems that I made, and I'm adding a little more darkness. Usually in watercolors, you generally try to work light to dark. And that's what I try to do here. And then by the end, you can add lots of little details like this. Little lines, little petal shapes, little leaf creases, the little veins on the leaves where the water would flow through. And I've got some purple blue here, and I've also got this cool shape here. So, you know, I could come over here and I could sort of extend this a little bit. Say there's another flower back there, you know, do cool things like this. Do little lines. You could say you want to define this leaf, you know, have some stems sticking out. And then sometimes what I'd like to do at this point is bring another, like a pretty color. I don't think red would be good for this, but if you did like a light pink, you can see I loved my pink to clean out. But I think it's fun to go back through and add a little bit of color to the outsides. Just the lightest bit. I think that's really fun. I think that's really kind of adds another element, another layer of interest. So I might add a little pink to some of the petals, maybe a little bit to the outsides. And that's about it. I would like, I'd like this to be just a hair darker. This center here. The centers, I should say. And then I rinse it off, get a nice light color. And that's about it. Oh, that was very, very wet. Let me write my name. Try that again. That's me. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed that. I hope that didn't get completely cut off down there. Take care. Enjoy painting.